WTO, a multilateral framework. Imagine a situation when many people are driving fast from different directions without traffic light at road crossing. Will there not be a chaos? As road needs traffic signals for an orderly movement, so does international trade require predictability, stability in the rules of the business. And World Trade Organization, that is WTO, seeks to provide exactly this. Objectives of WTO are to raise standard of living of people, to ensure full employment, to expand the protection of trade in goods and services, to protect and preserve environment, and to secure for less developed country a share in growth in the international trade, commensurate with the need of their economic development. The Uruguay round of multilateral trade negotiation, which started in 1986 to 1994, resulted in an agreement establishing the World Trade Organization, which serves as an umbrella agreement. It was established on 1st January 1995 with a permanent secretariat at Geneva and has over 500 staff. Currently, it has 164 member countries. WTO is successor to GATT but subsumed GATT. Insofar as GATT is concerned, it has 23 founding members countries including India. The GATT was a temporary in nature and its rules were applicable to trade in goods only. The scope of WTO, on the other hand, covers goods, services and intellectual property rights that it trips. Annexed to this umbrella agreement are dispute settlement mechanism, the trade policy review mechanism and plurilateral agreement. WTO seeks to do the trade without discrimination and there are four principles to ensure it. First is MFN, that is most favored nation treatment. Under Article 1, members are bound to grant to the products of other member countries the treatment not less favorable than it is accorded to the production of other countries. National treatment, that means once goods have been cleared by customs, imported goods must be treated no less favorably than the equivalent of the domestically produced goods. And third is predictability. And fourth is the transparency. The Doha Ministerial Declaration of November 2001 committed members to substantially improve market access, phase out of all forms of export subsidy, and substantial reduction in trade distorting domestic support. The Doha round remains unfinished and it is uncertain when or even whether it will be concluded. Virtually every item of Doha round negotiation is considered as part of whole and indivisible package and cannot be agreed separately. In other words, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Further, all major decisions in the WTO are normally taken by consensus. As subsidy by national governments impinge on competitiveness of goods and services and thus impact their relative share in the total world trade, it has been engaging the attention of most member countries. Let us briefly discuss various kinds of subsidy and support which are broadly classified in three boxes. First is green box. It is important to note that many of the provisions of green box support Annex 2 of the agreement were formulated to allow developed countries to continue providing subsidies without any limit. To illustrate, the provision allows the US to provide unlimited subsidy through its food stamp scheme. On the other hand, developing countries are constrained by their de minimis limit in providing support for food security through public stock holding programs. Next is blue box. Under the blue box, WTO members can provide support without limits provided they comply with the associated condition and there is no upper bound on the amounts of such subsidy. Given the shortage of food production in developing countries, little wonder then that developing countries have not been able to take recourse to this option. Out of three categories of subsidy, the blue box remains relatively shrouded in mystery. Let us understand and demystify the blue box. It was a result of compromise between the US and the EC during the Uruguay round of negotiation to create a carve-out reduction commitment under the umber box. For a long time, only a few developed nations such as EC, US, Japan, Iceland and Norway have used this box to support their producers. Without this box, some members such as Norway, Iceland and EU would have breached the AMS commitment. It shows that members have interpreted blue box provision with a varying degree of pliancy as per their convenience. It is widely held that the provision of blue box are incompatible with the needs of the developing members as they needed to stimulate production rather than limit it. Therefore, unsurprisingly, developing members have rarely explored the provision of blue box to support their producers. It was only in 2016 that China introduced the blue box measure for corn and in 2017 for cotton. The third category of subsidy is umber box. Any domestic support which is not covered under the categories of green box nor under blue box is categorized as umber box support. It includes price support measures and all non-exempt direct payment. The umber box is also called as aggregate measure of support. Imbalance in the export subsidy pillars. The imbalance and asymmetry in the provision on export subsidy are huge. Countries that were providing high export subsidy in the reference period of 1986 to 88 acquired the legitimacy to continue to provide export subsidy in future. On the other hand, most of developing countries did not provide export subsidy during the base period. As a result, they are unable to provide significant export subsidy. Tariff bindings. Quantitative restrictions on imports were put in place in India mainly due to balance of payment regions. Following the Uruguay round, India only had to bind its tariff and schedule the bound rates, and she submitted binding tariff rates from 15% up to 300%. What lies ahead? From 2015 onwards, developed countries and some developing countries no longer endorsed the Doha round and instead started negotiation on electronic, commerce, investment facilitation, trade and gender, trade and MSME. WTO is cast in the mold of interests of developed world and its rules have curtailed the policy space for developing country, but some developing country like India have gained in agriculture sector as it is net food exporting country. US is attempting to marginalize WTO and is likely to aggressively seek bilateral deals. It is not merely a short-term disruption. WTO in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. In the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, some WTO members have made proposals for negotiating new rules and disciplines on international trade in order to combat the health crisis. Two such proposals stand out. First is the joint submission made by New Zealand and Singapore, which seeks a commit from WTO members for ensuring that during the COVID-19 global pandemic, production and trade of essential items such as medical supplies and food continue to flow freely to their intended destination. The second submission was made by 48 member countries including the United States, EU, Japan, Australia, Brazil, which state as follows. As members take measures to address the pandemic, it is imperative that these measures do not adversely affect the trade in agriculture and agri-food products, which would ultimately have negative impacts on the food security, nutrition and health of members and their population. The foregoing two submissions appear to use the pandemic as an opportunity for extracting binding concession from developing countries at the WTO. These proposals could hinder developing countries' attempt at economic recovery in the post-COVID-19 phase. A developing country would not be able to give a fillip to their domestic producer by imposing tariff on large number of products. To sum up, the future of WTO does not appear to be promising. The Doha round has not yielded results. Developed countries have virtually resorted to phenomena of kicking away the ladder, meaning thereby that once a country has attained the summit of greatness, she kicks away the ladder by which she has climbed up in order to deprive others of the means of climbing after her. In the aftermath of COVID-19, with a paradigm shift towards Atmanirbhar, there will be an increasing tendency to reduce dependency on other nations for key supplies like food, medicine, defense equipment. Rules of the game of WTO are likely to be redefined and will undergo irreversible changes.